Today, we're going to be talking about master's degrees. So if you've been following our channel for a while, you might know that I did a master's degree before I started work. Specifically, I did a master's in banking law and financial regulation at the London School of Economics in the UK. You might also know that I'm currently in the process of applying for an MBA program after working as a corporate lawyer for 3.5 years, and I've had a lot of reflection over the last few weeks as to the value that I got out of my master's, and I thought I'd share it with you guys today. I'll be discussing a few different topics, all of which will be timestamped in the description below, so feel free to hop around to whatever section is relevant to you, but as always, we do appreciate it if you stay for the whole video. And I do want to mention before I get started that the things I'm going to talk about today are largely based off of my own experience, which may not apply to everybody. Where there are things that I think are a bit more specific to my own circumstance, I'll try to bring that up, but otherwise we'll try to speak more generally about master's programs as well. So first up, was my master's worth it from an education and learning perspective? So for me, I actually felt like my master's was a way better experience from an educational and just learning perspective than my undergrad degree. Master's programs tend to be a little bit more specialized, whereas undergrad programs tend to be a bit more generalist. Because of this, the courses that you take as a master's student tend to be a bit more honed in and specialized on specific topic areas that you might have interest in or you might think are relevant for your work. So to give a personal example of this, I took a course called International Financial Regulation, which basically told the story of the 2008 financial crisis, starting from the regulation that existed before the crisis, what actually happened during the crisis, and how regulations evolved after the crisis to basically shape the international financial system that we have today. I found this course super interesting because as a kid in high school, I was following along with a financial crisis very loosely as I was applying to university, and getting to learn about it in this level of detail really helped me understand exactly what happened. Realistically speaking, with the amount of presumed knowledge required for that course and the amount of depth that it really went into, I think it would have been very difficult to run that course as an undergrad course as opposed to one at a master's level. So that being said, if there's something that you absolutely are fascinated by and that you really want to drill down into, a master's can certainly help you get there, provided that all of the other factors I'm going to talk about also line up for you. Next up, let's talk about the relevance of a master's program for work. So I think there are a couple things to discuss here. The first is how relevant the things I learned on the master's were to the work I was doing at my last job. And the second is how much a master's will impact the job hunt or career prospects. So for my work, to be completely honest, the stuff I learned on my master's probably wasn't really that impactful on the work that I was doing. As a practicing lawyer, the work that I did on a daily basis kind of required learning on the job and experiencing things hands-on, but there were a few exceptions to this. The first is that there were specific things that I learned during my master's that were relevant to helping me better understand the types of things we were doing as lawyers. For example, I got pretty well versed in derivatives during my master's, and that really helped me when I was doing a rotation through my firm's derivatives team, and also when I was working on transactions generally that had a derivatives component. Secondly, I took an elective outside of the law faculty, which was in economics, since I thought, I'm at the London School of Economics, I should probably do an economics course. That course did a ton for me in terms of helping my general knowledge and just helping me understand how markets work, since I had never done an economics course up until then. That knowledge definitely helped me during my work because there were times when, for example, I'd be advising my clients and I would have a better understanding of the commercial realities of their business or the challenges that they face as a business because I just had that understanding of how markets worked. As a quick sidebar, that course was by far the hardest I took during my master's. I started with zero knowledge whatsoever and it ramped up pretty quick, but super worth it. And finally, a bit more generally, I think that I did learn a lot of stuff that just kind of helped my general worldview and maturity as a person. Since I was able to explore topics that I was interested in at a much deeper level than I was able to during my undergrad degree, I do feel like that experience developed me more as a person and helped me see the world in a different way. It's hard to identify specific things here, but it's more to say that I feel like I had a more rounded perspective after doing my master's, and I think that did help me when I was working as a lawyer. Worth mentioning though that this could just be that I got a little bit older and I was a bit more mature at the end of the master's, and that's what gave me that well-rounded perspective, but take this one with a grain of salt. It's also worth mentioning that as a lawyer in Hong Kong, there's a bit of a distinction to draw here. So in Hong Kong, very broadly speaking, there are two types of lawyers. There are barristers and there are solicitors. Barristers, simply put, are the type of lawyers that appear in court and are making legal arguments to judges and are otherwise doing things that are a bit more academic and technical in nature. Solicitors, on the other hand, tend not to appear in court and assist their clients in other ways, for example, by drafting contracts, reviewing agreements, doing deals, that type of thing. So that's what I did. I was a corporate solicitor, so I was advising my clients on deals, on contracts, on basically any type of transaction. So again, this is a bit of a generalization, but I would say that for barristers, a master's might be a touch more relevant just because the work that they do is a little bit more academic and really drilling into more technical points of law. I even know some barristers that have a PhD in law, so there you go. So it really does depend on the nature of the work, and maybe as a general statement, it could be said that the more academic in nature work tends to be, the more relevant a master's might be, but again, it really depends on the circumstance. Moving on to career prospects. So by the time I started my master's degree, I had already signed a contract with the firm that I was going to work for, so I wasn't actively looking for a job when I was doing my master's. That said, a lot of my classmates from around the world were actually using the master's as a means to apply for jobs in London because it was a lot easier to do so when they're geographically there. Also, because law tends to be very jurisdiction specific, a lot of my classmates were doing the master's specifically so that they could hopefully find a job in London afterwards. So, is a master's helpful for boosting career opportunities? In my case, not so much, but I think that's because I already had a job going into it. That said, I have spoken to partners and HR people, and the general consensus seems to be that a master's is good in that it shows that people have interest in law and are wanting to work in that area, but it's not strictly relevant to the work that we do, as solicitors at least, so it didn't really seem like it was something that would make a massive difference. In the past as well, whenever I was approached by recruiters, they didn't really care so much about my education. They were more concerned about the types of work that I had done as a solicitor in terms of offering me different job opportunities or figuring out which firms I might fit into. Now, I don't think this is necessarily true across the board. There are definitely some industries that require specialist knowledge, and if you haven't picked up that knowledge from your undergraduate degree, it might make total sense to do a master's so that it gives you that opportunity to apply for those jobs. So there's no simple answer for this one, but it really depends on the industry, the type of job, and whether or not any specialist knowledge is required to say whether or not a master's would be beneficial. Okay, so moving on next to the social element and the networking side of things, and I think this is a really good one. For me, when I did my master's, I was very fortunate to have classmates from all around the world, from Asia, from Europe, from Africa, North and South America, everywhere. The class was way more diverse than for my undergraduate degree in Hong Kong, which was mostly made up of local Hong Kong students like myself. It was definitely a super cool experience meeting all these different people and hearing their stories, and I'll still see some of them when I'm visiting their home countries or when they're visiting Hong Kong. So as far as networking goes, I haven't really engaged in this myself, but I do know that some of my classmates from different jurisdictions have worked together on transactions, or at the minimum have asked each other for recommendations on lawyers from their local jurisdiction. The master's was great for meeting new people, but I would say, for me at least, it was more of a social thing rather than a networking thing, although there was a bit of both. All right, moving on to the next topic, which is lifestyle. So as a master's student, at least in the UK, you had way less class time than an undergraduate student, and you had a lot more free time in your schedule to plan out however you'd like. This was definitely super nice from a lifestyle perspective because it felt more like an adult or grown-up experience than it was being an undergraduate student. You could plan out when you wanted to study, when you wanted to hang out with friends, when you wanted to spontaneously go on a trip. It was all kind of within your control, and you just had to be responsible about it. I think this is generally quite applicable to graduate degrees, but again, it really depends on the specific program. I was also able to live abroad in London for a year, which was fantastic. And on that note, if you're a student and you have an opportunity to study abroad, or if you're working and you have an opportunity to work abroad, definitely take it, because I look back at those experiences when I did those things, including my master's, as some of the best times in my life. And lastly, value for money. So I feel like this is going to be a hot topic. With everything said thus far, is a master's worth it from a financial perspective? Generally speaking, master's degrees are pretty expensive, and if you add on the fact that you're living abroad in a foreign country, those costs really add up. In my specific case, I was awarded a number of scholarships as an undergrad, which actually led to me having a surplus, and that kind of helped me a lot in terms of the financial considerations of doing a master's. On top of that, I come from a family of academics, and my parents were super supportive of me doing a master's, so they were able to help out with the costs as well. With all of that said, do I think the master's was worth the money? I think it really depends on what aspect you look at it from. Could I have done my job without doing the master's? Absolutely. On top of that, as I mentioned before, I already had a job lined up before I started my master's, so did I need to do the master's to get that job? Absolutely not. So in theory, for all the work I've done up until now, I didn't need to do that master's to help me in any way, shape, or form for my career progression. On a more personal level, I had a great time, it didn't put any massive financial strain on me, and I did learn a lot of things that I think helped shape my overall knowledge and just who I am as a person. So on that level, I think it was absolutely worth it. Now, that being said, I did have a number of classmates who ended up getting jobs in London that would have paid them a lot more than jobs they would have gotten in their home jurisdictions. So for them, it may have likely been a good financial investment for them to do the master's. Again, because law is a very jurisdiction-specific job, by doing the master's, some of my classmates were actually able to get jobs that they otherwise maybe wouldn't be eligible for. So I think in that respect, it was definitely worth it for them. This definitely applies to other industries too, where if you're trying to switch your job and move to a different industry or trying to get promoted but require some specialist knowledge to do so, then having a master's that teaches you those specific things you need to know could be really helpful. For example, I know some people want to get into data analysis, and that's a very specialized career, so oftentimes doing a master's can really help someone make that transition happen. If someone's able to increase their salary significantly by making that career jump or getting promoted with some specialist knowledge, then yeah, it could financially make a lot of sense to do a master's. So all in all, and again, the greatest lawyer answer of all time, whether or not a master's is worth it will really come down to you and your circumstances and what you want to use the master's for. As always, if you agree or disagree with any of the points I brought up, let me know in the comments. And if you guys have done a master's or if you're thinking about doing a master's, let me know as well. I'd love to hear your experience. And if you guys enjoyed the video, make sure to hit the like button, consider subscribing, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.